think outside the box, if you will. I mean, go there, go off campus. Let's think this through. And sure enough, that's where the Mustang was born. When it finally hit, it took the country by storm.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Cars in Context. I'm your host John Clor. This is the Motor City and this is the show where we put cars into the context of your everyday life. We've got another great show for you today, especially guys who like to collect cars, guys who think maybe someday when they grow up they'll collect cars, or maybe you already have a car collection. We've got really cool insight into the collector car hobby. What's going to happen to it? What's going to happen to it when us baby boomers get old? Will our kids collect cars? And what, if they do, what kind of cars will they collect? To do that, we have to bring in an expert, somebody who's actually run a collector car business, somebody that knows the ins and outs of the business and stays on top of it. For that, we brought in none other than Joe Babiasz. Joe, welcome back
John.
to Cars
Good to see you again.
Joe,
Thanks
you
for
ran
having
your own
me.
business in collector cars. You've dealt in collector cars. We've seen a big change in collector cars.
Massive change.
That nobody's talking about.
Well, we will.
All right, good. Well, that's why we have you here today.
Okay, let's do it.
But before we do that, it's time to find out what's happening
In the news.
in the news. Yeah. All right. Did you know about car segments? When we talk on Cars in Context, folks, about segments, what are we talking about? Well, at one time, there weren't a whole lot of segments. There were trucks and cars. And then there was like the big family car, the American car. It was called the full-size segment. And then there was the mid-size segment, like the Tempests and the Pontiac
Malibus.
And there was the Fairlanes. And then there was, eventually we had a compact segment. In the compact we had the Chevy Nova, the Ford Falcon, and that was just about it. And then what happened? Well, we started changing. Our taste changed. We brought Europe over. The subcompact happened. And then we followed suit. We didn't have front drives right away. We had our own subcompacts, Vega and Pinto and Gremlin. And then we went to Fiesta and Crew.
The first front-wheel drive.
Right. So today, the segments are all jumbled up. So when people talk to you about car segments, we're going to give you a quick little newsworthy item about segments. Today, the #1 segment is no longer the full-size American car. And I know what you're saying. Oh, I know. It's the small car, because we're all paying crazy gas prices. That's not it either. What do you think it is? The #1 segment in the United States is for crossovers. Now, Joe, it's the most confusing segment ever. What the heck is a crossover?
Well, it's a combination of a kind of a station wagon with a little bit of an SUV or a truck, a little bit bigger than a standard sedan. You can get more things in the back of it.
Right.
But yet it drives like a car. It gets
Right.
great gas mileage, and it does everything that the soccer moms and everybody likes to have those,
Right.
because it just does a little bit more than your standard car does.
So you people that thought, well, I used to have an SUV, and it was built off a truck, and then my father had a station wagon, but I wanted a car, but I liked the hauling of the SUV. What has happened? The car companies took these SUVs off of truck platforms, put them onto car platforms, gave them all the utility, sometimes even give them all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive.
Most of them.
And they call them crossovers. So that is what a crossover is. And by the way, you're leading the segment. Crossovers are up actually 12% last year in sales. Huge, huge, biggest segment in America. Now, #2, midsize. Midsize, what we used to think of midsize, the Taurus used to be a midsize, and the Crown Vic was the big one. Now Taurus and Impala, they're full-size cars.
They're the big cars.
So midsize would be your Malibu, your Fusion, the Accord and Camry are considered midsize, whereas the larger cars are not selling in that. The midsize segment is now #2.
And that's based on a volume of interior space and so on.
Yeah,
that's
and
how
then trunk
they
size.
come up with it. It has to meet a certain criteria for
Right.
that.
So those used to be leading the market. They've actually shrunk by the same percentage that crossovers went up, 12%. Now what's the third one? Small cars. So you folks out there saying, I got to get me a little economy car. Those small cars are actually now third biggest, even with the gasoline prices where they are. But they've actually been dropping of late, even with gas up around almost $4 a gallon. Then pickup trucks, folks. As America runs, so do pickup trucks. We got to sell pickup truck. As much as you hear about them in the news, the sales are, if you look year over year from last year, they're kind of flat. They're actually kind of flat. So, but they're very important, and they're the money makers for the car companies. And the same goes for vans. Remember back in the day, you had vans.
Minivans.
Remember the
We had the big
minivan-
van.
First, you had the big vans. You know, the ones with porthole windows. Don't come and knock when this van's a rockin'. It had speakers in it, but that stuff went. Then minivans. Every mom had a minivan. Any family. You took the kids to hockey and soccer. Minivans kind of went away. Ford got out of the business for a while. Some people thought we don't need them anymore. The Japanese stayed in it. Chrysler, of course, one of the guys who invented it. Thank you, Mr. Hal Sperlich. But you know what? They're down. They're actually flat. And at the bottom of the pile, what used to be the bread and butter of the American car market, full-size cars.
Amazing.
Isn't it amazing? We've topsy-turvied. That's about. I mean, when you talk about car companies, they've really rethought things. But you got something about car companies rethinking something else to help us.
We do. This has to do with GM, the Tahoe and the Yukon.
The full-size utility, truck-based utility.
Truck, yep, still has a full frame. There's apparently a very large amount of theft of the third row seat. I wasn't aware of this, but apparently a lot of people are stealing the third row seats
Oh, it's horrible.
and then selling them on Craigslist or selling them at swap meets.
No, look at this, Joe. This is actually what
there's an example of
they blow
what
out your
happens.
your
Yeah,
tinted
they-
glass.
Yeah, they'll bust your glass and grab the third seat.
They
and
can unlatch it, right?
They can unlatch it and easily get it out once they can get entry from the back of the car. To
Okay.
open up the lift gate, so they'll do that, and of course they don't
Throw
care
it in
about
their
breaking
car and drive
anything.
away.
Throw it in the back of their truck, then it'll show up on Craigslist a week or two later, and it gets sold. So GM,
Those things are $1,000 to replace
they
or
are
more,
probably
maybe even more.
1,000. But, yeah, well,
Then the
that's-
glass
Then the
damage?
glass, then the repair, and you don't have your truck for a couple of days. It's a real pain in the neck. So what GM's done
Okay.
is they've tried to implement some changes. One of them is the third seat now does not come out. It folds flat, but it is apparently I'm assuming bolted into the car.
So, okay, so
They've-
don't even bother. You think you're going to break into
It's
the car.
not coming
break
out
it.
easy. It's not. It'll come out, but it's not coming out easy.
Okay, all right.
But in addition, what General Motors has done is they've introduced into the quarter glass and the back glass where that if you break the glass, an alarm will go off. The car alarm will go off saying, "Hey, somebody's broken into your car." For those thieves who say, "Well, gee, I'll cut the battery cable," I'm
they
a
get into
smart
the car,
thief,
the
I'm going to
alarm's
cut the
not gonna go
battery
off now.
cable,
Yeah,
and
now
no,
it-
the alarm's not going to go off. Well, GM is smarter than the thieves, and what they've done is the alarm has its own little battery. So even if
cutting
you
the
cut,
cable.
cutting the cable does no good. The alarm will go off, and they've also put a dome lamp style alarm or camera or something in there to help the owner identify that the car has been broken
What
into.
if you just, what if you get up underneath and jack it up and tow it away?
Well, if
There
the
you
car, with the new system, with General Motors system,
Yeah.
you jack the car up, the alarm goes off. And you jack the car up and you cut the battery cables, the alarm still goes off. And when you get into the back, the seat doesn't come out, so don't even bother taking out
Damn
the
you
third seat.
thieves!
So
Just
there
stop
it
it.
is. No more.
Get a job!
Yeah, really. Buy it at the dealer. You want a third seat, buy it at the dealer.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's good news. That's good.
It
Well,
is
see,
good
we want them to, unfortunately, you have to protect your car from thieves. Well, here's something that's kind of, we talk about China all the time. You say to me, John, why do you bring this up on Cars in Context? This is Detroit. Well, a lot of things that we think about Detroit is actually moving to China. And here's something that we think about Detroit, the Ford Taurus. Moving to China. That's right. They're going to not only sell the Taurus in China, they're going to build it. Shanghai Ford is going to manufacture the Ford Taurus in China and sell it there with a 3.5 liter V6. They got the turbo 2 liter, and they're going to add a new engine that we don't even have over here. The Chinese version will get a 2.5 liter turbo. But here's the deal. Because of the exchange rate and the cost of cars in China, a Ford Taurus built in China and sold in China, $50,000 MSRP.
That's incredible.
$50,000
That's
base price. Now here it's about $25,000, $26,000 base price. So just to show, that shows you the walk. If they want an American car, what they got to pay for it. But Ford's gonna-
In addition, in China, unlike America, if you want to sell something in China, you have to build it in China.
Correct.
You have to, and you partner, I believe, with
With
the
one of the-
government.
with the government.
With the government, a pseudo corporation.
So that's
but-
why it's Shanghai Ford and not
So-
Ford. So we can't build them here and ship them there against
And
the law.
$50,000 for China. That's an
I think
incredibly
the government's
expensive
going to make a little bit of
car.
money there.
I'm sure they will.
So Joe, any other news out of the industry we need to tell everybody about?
Yeah, catalytic converters come out, I think, in the early 70s. And
Another
reduced-
highly stolen item because of the
Yeah,
precious metals in there.
absolutely, yeah,
They co-
especially,
I know
you know,
people
in
that
Detroit,
park and they
They slice and dice them. You're out
take
for
your
lunch,
converter
and
for
you come out, and
scrappers.
your car is noisy, and you find out the
Scrappers.
converter was yanked in a matter. Now they have cordless sawzalls now,
Yeah.
battery-powered sawzall, and you could, especially if you have an SUV that sits up a little higher, you can just climb onto that thing and within 30 seconds, it's
Scrappers
gone.
have
It's gone.
destroyed life in Detroit, and catalytic converters are so expensive.
They are. But there's researchers in Imperial College of London that have developed a catalytic converter that they say improves fuel economy and cuts manufacturing costs.
Yes, lower cost. That's
Lower
what we
cost,
want.
it's always
How
a
do you-
good thing, as long as it gets passed on to
Well,
some,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Well, how do they do
And
that?
it uses 80% less rare earth metal,
Which is the cost.
which reduces
Platinum, yep.
reduces the cost, and it has an increased surface area that the exhaust will flow through, which means an 80% less
Well, okay.
amount of the honeycomb substrate that's required.
Well,
So it's
that's-
a totally different design.
Well-
It's going to improve fuel economy up to 3%.
Cost
And
less-
3% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking millions of barrels of fuel a day being used,
Yeah.
3% is a lot of fuel.
Again, great engineering kids, great school. They go to school and they figure out how to.
Well, some smarter
Smart-
ideas.
Very good idea.
Yep.
We love that. We love that. But you know what? I'm not off my China kick.
Go ahead, I'm all ears.
And I'm talking about the China we got when we got married. It's probably still in the dining room. I'm talking about China is becoming a huge player in the auto industry, and we used to have to start paying attention here in Detroit. It just passed a milestone. In fact, you think about the latest figures show there are 250 million motor vehicles now in China. I know they have a huge pollution problem, but 250 million motor vehicles, that is about the same as in the United States. And they had nothing. I mean, they were running around 10, 20 years ago, motor vehicles were rare. They're only in the big cities. Rickshaws were everywhere. I mean, they had bicycles. And now they're really motorized. They have 137 million passenger cars. And 10 years ago, think about this, 10 years ago, they only had 24 million.
But China's population, I think, is about tenfold that of the U.S. I might be off on that a little bit. So even though they have that many cars, they're the same as the U.S., they still have a lot of growth in
Yeah.
China. And that's why the American car companies are pushing to get into China and sell product there. They are the equivalent of America back in 1910, 1920,
That's exactly right.
when there were still a lot of people that did not have cars.
So that's why, when you talk about, I'm saying it's a Motor City, and this is the show when we talk about it, it's important to know that China is a growth market, and we need to know what's going on over there. And that's why we bring it to you in the news. But you know what? We're not going to just take a break now and start talking
We're
about
just
the
getting
show.
rolling, John.
No, we are. We want to talk about classic cars and what's happening because no other show on television is really addressing it. They're acting like all these restoration shows and they're rolling around in cash, and that's not really what's going to happen. We gotta sound the bell. But before we do that, we have a new segment of the show. It's called Car Trivia Time. And now is Car Trivia Time. We're going to ask you a trivia question, and we're going to ask you then to put on your thinking caps and come up with the answer. Of course, we're going to give
We know the answer,
We're going to
though.
give them the answer, of course. Yeah. So today's trivia question, you ready? Where was the first drive-in restaurant in America open? Where was the first? I'm talking about the very first drive-in restaurant.
And
was
when?
It, where was it opened and when? No, Jeremy, that was not the question. That was the first stoplight question. The question this week is, where was the first drive-in restaurant in America open, and then when? So you're going to take a little break, and you're going to come back, and you're going to give us the answer, and if you don't, we'll give it to you, I guess, right after this. Hi, and welcome back to Cars in Context. I'm your host, John Clor. Today we're talking to Joe Babiasz. Joe, thank you for coming to Cars in Context.
Hi, John.
We're going to
Good
be
to see you
talking
again.
about this fantastic piece of news that we have alone. Nobody's talking about it. Everybody's thinking the collector car industry is going great guns. You see the Barrett-Jackson auctions. Everybody's rolling in money. But there is there's something coming up.
There's some storm
There's-
clouds
yeah,
coming
and
up.
we're going to talk about them. But before we do that, before the break, we gave you a trivia question. And Jeremy might have tried to throw you off there here, but I'm going to tell you what the question is again. Here is the question. The question was, where was the first drive-in restaurant in America open? And if you want a bonus, we'll say, and when was it? So are you thinking? You had the chance over the break to think. We're going to give you the answer now. You ready? Okay. The first drive-in restaurant in America was Royce Haley's Pig Stand. And that was opened in Dallas, Texas in 1921.
A long time ago.
There it is.
Look at
there is a picture
See Model T's
Roy-
there.
of Royce
Little tea
Haley's
bucket.
Pig Stand in Dallas. That's his store, and that's people.
That actually looks quite
They drove up
large.
and got pig meat,
Not a
something.
pound of pig.
Probably pulled pork or something. That was awesome.
Probably good barbecue.
See,
In Texas,
you're
it's
learning
probably the
st-
best
yeah, yeah.
barbecue you
You're
can
learning
get.
stuff every day, which is why we bring you our car trivia time. But now it's time to put Joe Babiasz in the driver's seat. And Joe, let's set this up. We've seen collector cars. We know it's a huge hobby. Over the years, the boomers went back. And remember, they used to buy the brass era cars, the Duesenbergs and the Auburns, and those were the Concours d'Elegance. And those are the great cars of the era. And then, of course, there were the imports and the old Mercedes and all these old BMWs. And then it was race cars. Then it was Pebble Beach. And then it was the auctions. And there was old 50s Finns and Fat-Fendered street rods and classic rods and 32 Fords. And there was everything under the sun. And then what happened? We started shifting away from those 50s cars. And we started to get into muscle cars, the muscle cars that we as baby boomers remember when we were growing up. And now the market's shifting again. And the question we have for you is, where is the classic car market headed? Now, before you go watch these shows on television and think it's all just big money and it's going to go on forever, think about what your kids would collect. Would they keep your classic car collection? Do they love cars like you do? What is our exiting the market, not necessarily because we want to, it's because we're getting old and we're going to pass away eventually. Joe, we need to tell the story of what's happening with the market. You've been watching it, you've been involved in it, your business was in it, but tell us, give us the Joe Babiasz crystal ball. Tell us the story.
John, I think there's some clouds up ahead, and especially if somebody wants to invest in a collector car, you really need to do your due diligence and buy the car at the right price, but more importantly, buy the right car. If you spend a little bit more extra money on a really good car, you'll still probably be okay. But what I'm seeing, I think in the near future, we're going to start seeing a shift away from the muscle cars.
Away from
The muscle cars, because the guys that, 2006, 2007 was about the peak for a lot of these cars. Everybody, all of the baby boomers, we are buying them today.
Yep.
But soon we won't be buying them anymore. And when you look at what younger people, there's two segments younger people are into today. One is tuners for the very young 20 to 30-year-old hot rodder. And the other one, and we saw this recently at Autorama,
we did a show
where
at
there's an
Autorama.
entire floor of rat rods. And these are cars that are built from parts from the junkyard. They're
Old
not
cars.
old, very old cars typically. They're not the fastest. They're not muscle cars necessarily.
No.
But it speaks of a personality. And these people are typically in their 20s to 40s. And so this is the next generation. We, I think, are going to slowly, the muscle car scene is going to slowly die out.
Say it
Maybe
isn't
not in the
so,
next
Joe.
10 years.
Say
But
it
let me
isn't
give you a
so.
few examples. I pulled some studies as an example on
Okay.
a 70 Hemi Cuda convertible.
$1 million.
Now, at its peak, I'm talking about the best car. In 2006, they sold for as high as $2 million.
Holy cow.
In 2014, the highest sale price is $1.2 million. So a net loss of $800,000. Hemis
What?
are flat. Are they ever going to come back to $2 million? Probably not in our lifetime.
No.
You look at 53 Corvettes. Now, it's not a muscle car, but it was
No.
a first-year
Blue
Corvette.
Flame 6?
In 2006, highest price $250,000. 2014, $350,000. So you make $100,000. But here's the other one. Gee, what am I going to buy? Am I buying a muscle car? It's going to guarantee me a lot of money. 59 BMW 507 Roadster. It's a rare car.
Yeah.
It's not a fast car per se, but it's a nice car. In 2006, it sold for $500,000, the top one. 2014, it sold for $1.6 million. So a plus of over $1 million in that time frame. And what we're seeing is the muscle car trends are down with some exceptions. If you have
Boss 9.
Boss 9 is an example, an LS6 Chevelle, big block Corvettes, very, very rare, one of a kind, or one of 20 built. If it's an exceptional car that's been documented, that's another show.
Yes.
Documented.
We'll do a show
Does
on
it
that.
have the pedigree?
Yeah.
Can you document this is the original engine? Did it come out of the factory this way? Do you have the protective plate? If it's a General Motors car, you've got the Marty report for most Mustangs, most Fords, because he now bought the rest of Ford's information. So I'm concerned about the hobby, that the muscle cars will start to wane. We're starting to see there is a softening in most of them.
Sure there is.
So that's the direction it's going, and it's not the direction I like, because I have a nice R-Code Cobra Jet that I'm trying to finish
I know
up
you
and
are.
sell. I need to hurry up and get rid of
All right,
this thing.
folks, what Joe is saying here, are you listening to us? Are you listening to Cars in Context? Because this little roller coaster ride you've been on with your collector car is not going to last forever. What's happening now is guys just 5, 8, 7, 9, 10 years ahead of us are passing on, and they're leaving to their family a nice collection of 50s cars, big fin cars, and some early muscle cars. And the families are going, I don't want Dad's cars. Much like the street rods. We didn't want street rods, we wanted muscle cars. Well, guess what? They don't want your muscle car. So they're trying to, the more people that are unloading these muscle cars into the marketplace means
Saturating the market.
there's more of them out there. The prices are going to go down now, unless. And then, what's that old thing, Joe? They said there were more Camaro SS's and Shelby Mustangs that they ever built. How did that happen? Because you pull an old.
They clone them.
They clone them. You pull out a junk. You can buy all the parts, the badges.
Absolutely.
Put a crate motor in it. You paint it red, and you run it through the auction. You make a lot of money.
And unlike Mustang, what Ford did so very well by putting the engine code in the VIN number, General Motors didn't do that. And so a lot of times you can build a clone and no one will know the difference. And if you say, "Oh, I don't have the build sheet," but it's a real deal. And there are a lot of people that go into this with emotion. When they go with, I finally have the money. The kids are out of college.
Right,
I finally have a few dollars to spend. I'm buying what I'm going to
But
relive my youth.
I never was able
and
to
they
afford it.
pull into the driveway, and this thing has got a great paint job, and it's a pile of junk because people don't know what to look for. I highly recommend, if you're going to go and buy a collector car, no matter what it is, find an expert who's involved in that particular, not a generalist. If you want to buy a Corvette, find a Corvette expert. If you want to buy a Mustang, find a Mustang expert. Pay these people up front. They're worth their weight in gold.
It's worth it.
Because once you write the check and you own the car and you get it home and you find out the bottom of the car is nothing but sheet metal and screws instead of a floorboard, you're not going to be very happy.
Okay, so we're not sounding the bell. We're not scaring you off of the collector. We want you to enjoy collector cars. Go to Woodward and the Dream Cruise and bring your favorite car. But folks, it's really important to do your homework. Joe, we're going to have you back. We're going to do a show all about buying a collector car, and because that's important. But we just wanted to tell you with this show that this isn't going to last forever. So go out and have your fun and enjoy it now, because your kids will be collecting Star Wars figures. Or something. I don't know.
Or something.
And I would have that Boss 429.
iPads. They'll be collecting
who knows?
iPads.
I would have a Boss 429 multi-million-dollar Mustang, but my wife, Jenny, wants to waste our money on stupid things like mortgages and food.
Go figure. What's up with that?
Women.
Well, we need to talk to her.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you, Joe. That's great info. We'll have you back for that. But now I've got another new segment.
What's that?
It's called Pick of the Week. This time, we're going to show you a picture, and we're going to think that it's going to be, we think it's interesting, and we think you're going to think it's interesting too. So this week, our pick of the week is none other than, you ready? We're talking about collector cars. How about a concept car that somebody sold and bought? This, folks, is a 1953 Cadillac, you ready? Le Mans concept car. It was done by none other than customizer George Babiasz. Look at,
That is incredible.
You think your Camry had the gold package on it?
Look at that.
That thing,
Stunning.
it's got more gold and more Dagmars on it than, look at those white walls.
And George is still with us. He's
George Babiasz is
he's
still
still building cars, and I think he's well into his 80s today.
So when you talk about collector cars, I love going to shows and seeing concept cars. Folks, that's our pick of the week.
That is a beautiful car.
If you got an idea for that, you can send it to me, Jay Clor, but that's not all.
What else?
Now becomes one of our favorite segments of the whole show. It's called Pride in My Ride. And that's when you, the viewer, sends me a picture of your car and tells us, why do you have pride in your ride? But this time, I'm not waiting for you viewers. I've got Joe Babiasz. Joe, I think you should tell us if you have any pride in your ride and show us. what
I
your
have
car-
pride in my pile of junk, as you'll see in a minute.
What?
It's,
All right, what do
there
you
it is. That's my latest acquisition.
You bought a Corvette.
I bought a Corvette.
Joe, it looks like
now,
burns,
before you
Joe.
say, and the paint needs a little work, before you say this is a pile of junk,
I didn't
this
say
is
that.
this is where this is an unmolested car that it had one repaint years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I found this car thanks to a neighbor of mine who called me while I was on vacation somewhere. Going, I went to an open house for sale. This Corvette is sitting. That's the garage it was sitting in, literally blocks from my house.
Wow.
And I was able to score this, and it's kind of a rare car because it's a '67. It's one of the most popular of that mid-year. It has the L79, 350 horse,
Well, there it is.
327.
Yeah.
It had not been registered since '86.
Doesn't look like the mice have been in the engine
No.
part.
Well, we fired the car up New Year's Day. We fired the car up, and I have the car at home now. It's sitting on my lift, and it is. That is as ugly as it is. That is an investment quality car if purchased right.
Folks, that's pride. I love it. I love it.
I love the car. It's great.
Thank
It's
you for
ugly,
that.
but it's great.
If you have pride in your ride, send it to me, Jay Clor, carsandcontext.com, and we'll be sure to put it on the air. But Joe, there's even more. Now we ask Lauren Parrott of WMTV to see if we have any viewer mail so we can read that. Lauren,
Gosh, I hope we
is
do.
it possible that Cars and Context has viewer mail again this week?
John,
Yeah?
you
Look at that.
always have your
Oh, thank you
She's
so much,
amazing.
Lauren.
every single show.
Thanks for
She's
bringing
amazing.
it out, Lauren.
Wow,
I
thank
don't know
you,
how
Lauren.
she does it. She finds
I
viewer
know.
mail for us. Thank
Incredible.
you, Lauren.
Incredible.
I really think
She should run for president. I
Joe, you
think.
should read this first one.
All right. This first one comes from Jen S. of Allen Park, who watches Cars in Context on ATTU verse Channel 99.
Okay, Jen.
Dear Cars in Context, my father recently passed away and left his 1958 Corvette in his will. Nobody in the family actually wants to own it. What? So, hello?
Kids.
I can't fathom that.
Kids.
So what would be the best way to find out what it's worth and properly sell it? You know, that's a really good question, especially with a Corvette. The first thing is you need to contact some Corvette experts, Corvette appraisers, or appraisers that specialize in Corvettes.
Have them come out to the house.
Have them come out to the house. It's going to cost you probably $200, $400 perhaps.
But
this potentially could
The
be
family-
a 40 to 80. If it's a fuel injected Corvette, it could be worth
Yeah.
a lot of money. So do your homework. Also look online at the various websites. Find out what they're currently selling for.
Yeah.
But be realistic on the condition of the car. Make sure it's it is what it is in terms of how you present it and how you sell it.
And Jen, we will bring Joe back. We'll do a whole show on how to buy and sell a collector car. I think that's a great question.
Be happy
Jen.
to do it,
And that's
John.
what's happening. That's what's happening. We're getting older, and our cars are not being collected by our kids. But I've got another one before we go. Don't go. I got a question. This one comes to us from Mike R. of Harper Woods, Michigan, who watches Cars in Context on Comcast 915. That's HD, so high definition. John, I saw your show on the 50th anniversary Mustang with Donald Farr, and was wondering why the April 17th birthday celebrations were held in Charlotte and Las Vegas and not in Mustang's birthplace
Good question.
of Dearborn. That's a great question. I can tell you why. The MCA, Mustang Club of America, had it there because normally they had it down south at a racetrack, and normally they had it up, and they wanted to split it in two places so both people on both sides of the country could enjoy it. Ford didn't want to do something here because they thought in April in Michigan,
Never know.
not good. So Ford, by the way, there will be something in August 17th, Mustang Memories on the Ford campus, the Mustang Club of Southeastern Michigan, 2,000 cars there.
Wow.
It's right after the Woodward Dream Cruise, day after. Go to it then. Thank you for sending that in, Mike. I hope that answers your question, and I hope you enjoyed our time. Joe, it's already up. Thank
Tom,
you so
my
much.
pleasure to be here.
We'll come back and
Great
talk
time.
about this wonderful stuff. Folks, we hope that you've learned something because knowledge is power. And I've been your host, John Clor, and thanks for watching.